Chapter 1. Stargazing.
A war horn echoed through the valley, breaking my focus. My opponents didn't miss a beat as they threw their cards down on the table and jumped from their seats. Not wanting to look as reluctant as I felt about my first battle, I followed suit and tossed my winning hand on the table. Just my luck. I pulled my sword from the ground nearby and picked up my shield. My eyes darted around the area, frantically searching for my helmet. Like my sword, it was made of metal and actually offered some protection, unlike the ragged, used leather vest the benevolent Kerskins handed out to recruits. Sadly, my helmet was nowhere to be seen, and was most likely adorning someone else's head now. It had been foolish of me to let it out of my sight. I rolled my eyes, madder at myself than the thief, and looked around for my fellow recruits. Ellis and William were already 100 paces away, sprinting toward the battlefield, the game of cards long forgotten. I sighed and ran after them, helmetless. I'd just have to keep my head down. If I failed to reach my spot in the formation in time, I'd be whipped or worse. During my brief time in combat training, I witnessed a Kerskin kill a man for marching out of step. If I missed this charge, Commander Creech would gut me in front of the rest of the men. I'd rather not be made an example of today, or any day, for that matter. I charged after the only two men whose names I knew, pitching myself forward and down the hill as fast as my muddy boots would allow. I was one of the last to arrive, but thankfully not the last. Commander Creech eyed me as I approached, a snarl forming on his ugly green face. "Fall in line, you useless mutt," he hissed at me. "To the front." Creech was a Kerskin, a race more reptilian than human. They stood upright like humans, but tended to be shorter than us. Their height meant little, as the average Kerskin was both stronger and faster than most humans. Not to mention, each and every one of them was capable of extraordinary feats, and could wield powers that humans could only dream of. Growing up, I'd heard countless tales of magic and other wondrous abilities. Witches who could call forth storms, shamans who could heal the sick. I'd even heard stories of necromancers who could raise the dead, but I'd never seen any magic myself. Not until I met a Kerskin. Most people from this part of Vedra believed that the Kerskins were sent by God to protect them from the Dalari. My uncle had told me that the lizards had come to Erda by descending from the heavens, which I assumed was where one would expect an angel to come from. I had believed him until I met one for myself. The Kerskins were violent and mean, and had little regard for the humans fighting in their armies. They bled just like me, and as far as I was concerned, angels weren't supposed to bleed. Also, they weren't supposed to be ashholes. I didn't say anything to Creech and fell in line as quickly as possible. My commander had more important things to worry about than one stupid human. His attention had been redirected to organizing the others of his kind who were joining us for the battle. The other Kerskins were strong, but Creech was in charge of this contingent for a reason. A couple days ago, I'd overheard Creech bragging to some of his scaly underlings. He was gloating about reaching level 15, while shaming the others for falling behind. I didn't know much about the Kerskins' military structure, or what the rankings meant, but the other Kerskins had seemed impressed. The structure of their military was one of the many things I didn't know about my Kerskin leaders, but what little I did know paled in comparison to my ignorance of our true enemy. The Dalari were taller than most humans, and unlike the scaly Kerskins, their skin was more human-like, smooth, with a blue tinge. I'd never seen one up close, but the odds were good that I was about to. It was said the Dalari moved like dancers, lithe and graceful. They were as beautiful as they were deadly. Creech galloped before the formation on his huge armored stallion and lifted his axe. "The wait is over," he shouted, his voice raspy and heavy. Words seemed to vibrate out of his throat. "Let's send these blue demons back to the depths where they belong." The men cheered. So did I. But I didn't feel nearly as excited as I sounded. This is our chance to turn the tide and halt the enemy's advance into Vedra. We must not let it slip away. The time has come to fight for your king and his Kursk allies. Be brave, be mighty, be brutal. Creature's stallion reared upward, and he held his heavy axe high above his head. To glory! We charged when Creech pointed his gigantic axe to the field before us. Across the distant field, the enemy began its advance. Like the Kurshkins, the vast majority of the Dalari fighting force was human, but these particular humans had chosen to side with the enemy. I didn't know if they did so willingly, or if the Dalari had compelled them. I was raised on a farm, and the nearest town couldn't have had more than 50 people living in it. My worldly knowledge was severely lacking, and the politics of this war were beyond me. All I knew was that when the swords came out, it was either them or me. I felt strangely calm as I marched forward, as if this was what I was meant to be doing. In my heart, I was fighting for King Constance and for the people of Edra, not for the Kurskins. This war gave me a purpose, something I never knew I lacked when I was working my uncle's farm day after day, year after year. The thought gave me comfort, and I hoped the others marching beside me felt the same. Arrows began to rain down upon us when we were 200 meters out. My shield was wooden but strong and tested in practice. No arrow would bring me down. Still, a helmet would have been nice. I spared a glance behind me. A sea of 500 men flowed down the valley, with over a dozen mounted Kurshkins riding along our flanks. There were more scattered among the footmen. The Kurshkins treated humans as inferior, but at least they fought alongside us, even if it wasn't always on the front line. The arrow volleys had done little to weaken our advance, just as our archers' attempts had failed to halt the opposing side. The enemy was closing in fast now, and my previous sense of calm receded, replaced by the fear that had been hiding underneath all along. It wasn't a bad thing. Fear shouldn't be ignored. It should be embraced. I wanted to survive, and the only way to do that was to be better and to fight harder than my opponents. My fear would give me the motivation I needed. The enemy line was 20 yards away, and I could feel the thunder of their boots. My teeth chattered as my adrenaline skyrocketed. Metal clashed, and screams rang out as the two sides collided. I brought my shield up and slammed into the enemy before me. Someone behind me reached over with a spear, jabbing forward into the mass of enemies. When they pulled it back, the tip was red with blood. As I was taught, I pushed forward again with the vanguard, and the spearmen followed behind with more precise thrusts. We did this thrice more. On the next shield push, those on the shield wall would bear our swords and go on the offensive. I put my shoulder into my shield and pushed forward with all my strength, then took a step back and raised my sword. Without hesitating, I brought it down in an overhand swing. My cheap sword failed to cut through my opponent's chainmail, but he still let out a cry of pain. I yanked my sword back and followed through with a thrust. The tip of my sword broke through his chainmail and pierced the soft flesh underneath. I wrenched it out of his gut as he crumpled to the ground. More enemy soldiers replaced him, and the onslaught continued. I brought my shield back up and blocked their initial attacks. I tried to step back, but there was no room to maneuver. I was trapped between the enemies at my front and the allies at my back. My shield took a beating as I hid behind it. A boom rocked the battlefield, and enemy soldiers tumbled through the air. The explosion distracted my opponents, giving me the opening I needed. I rammed my shield into the closest enemy, knocking him to the ground, and tried to do the same with another. This one was already swinging his sword, so I lifted my shield just in time to deflect. I countered with a stab, but couldn't get past his defenses. There was another explosion, closer this time. Some of the enemy soldiers tried to flee from the danger, causing further chaos in their ranks and creating a gap for my army to maneuver. I saw something huge wreaking havoc in my peripherals and smiled. Creech was coming on his stallion. "I'd run if I were you," I said to the enemy soldier before me. We were both on the defense, making cautious attacks to test for an opening. He snarled at me. "I'm no coward, not like you cursing lapdog."